Hi, it's Friday. It's June 17th. That means it's another edition of the Zogby Report, Real and Unscripted. A little history test here. June 17th, 1972 was the famous Watergate break-in. So it's the 50th anniversary of what became Watergate, a noun in and of itself. How you doing this week, Jerem?
I'm doing pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing okay. There's too much to talk about, and so here I am rushing in my mind trying to figure out where to start. And so this is what I settled on. I think we've talked about the hearings. Maybe I'll weave the hearings into the body of the report, but I wanted to do kind of a status report on Congress and where we might stand in November. Most of the major pundits, are predicting a Republican landslide, an overwhelming landslide, in fact, and a big gain by Republicans in the House, and certainly enough gains in the U.S. Senate to take over the majority. I have to admit that from the vantage point of today, it certainly looks like that will happen. But as I said at the very beginning, this is June 17th, and a lot can happen between now and then. So what I wanted to do was just get a status report, give a status report by numbers where we stand right now. And then maybe you and I can talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages that each party faces, between now and November. So let's start with the House. Okay, as things stand right now, Democrats hold a very slim 3-seat majority in the House. If you look at some recent numbers, Real Clear Politics today says that the GOP has 223 seats in the bag, or at least ahead. That would be enough right there to give the Republicans a majority. 218 is a majority. 223 GOP, 180 Democrats, and 32 are a toss-up. Now, Democrats then would have to win all of those 32 toss-up states and even win some of those that, at least for the moment, the Real Clear Politics and others are saying are safely GOP. So that's one set of numbers. Another set of numbers is that imperfect measure, but one that we still use, and that's the generic. And the Republicans on average lead the generic by 46% who say, I'll vote for the Republican, 43% who say, I'll vote for the Democrat. And a warning, given the structure of the districts in the country, Democrats should have a 5-point lead in the generic in order to break even. So with a 3-point average lead by the Republicans, that's in effect saying that the Republicans are leading pretty substantially. The most recent polls are split. Those that were just taken within the last week, YouGov shows the Republicans leading by 4. But Morning Consult, who works with Politico, has the Democrats leading by 2. In effect, kind of saying the same thing. Leading by 2, the Democrats is not enough. That's the House. Over in the Senate, couldn't get much closer. It's 50-50, including 2 independents that caucus with the Democrats. So Democrats net can't lose 1 seat. And so I just am taking a quick look at a few of the key states we've been talking about. Ohio is a Republican seat, and right now J.D. Vance, the author, is leading the Democrat Tim Ryan by 3 points, but it's only 42-39. Those are not good numbers yet. That means there's a lot who are undecided. Over in Arizona, where you have Mark Kelly, is the incumbent Democrat running for re-election. Mark Kelly, at least for now, seems to be leading all of the polls, although there hasn't been anything too recent. Georgia is an interesting one. You remember that Raphael Warnock won a special seat, 2-year term. He won by a little over 1% in a state that Joe Biden won by a couple of tenths of a percent. And right now, it's tied. The Real Clear Politics average is tied at 47. The most recent poll against Herschel Walker has the two candidates tied at 46. These are both taken before some bad information has come out about potentially damaging to Herschel Walker, that he's fathered 3 children that he refuses to recognize. Missouri is a Republican seat, and that appears like it could be more vulnerable than we previously thought. One of the reasons why is the very damaged former governor forced to resign because of both corruption and sexual harassment is leading the GOP primary. And Democrats and independents are suggesting that his leading the Republican Party in the Senate race could be problematic. That could be a seat that Republicans count on, but that they lose. Nevada and Pennsylvania. I'm going to skip over Nevada for the time being because right now the Senate incumbent Democrat is leading, but nothing recently taken. I'm fascinated by Pennsylvania. John Fetterman, felled by a stroke, has not been campaigning. His wife's been doing the campaigning, is now officially running as a Democrat progressive against Mehmet Oz. And right now, Fetterman is leading by 9 in a poll taken just last week, 46 to 37. Bad numbers for Oz, a seat that the Democrats could very well lose. Well, the Republicans hold it now, but they could very well lose this. But the Oz, for the moment, seems to have come out of his primary victory damaged. And I could give reasons why I think that's so, but we'll do that in the course of the conversation. You chime in now. What do you think?
Well, you step back and, well, that's my favorite thing to do. Anytime you're looking at something, especially in the digital age, there's a lot of noise. And so you get bombarded with all the noise. So you really have to soar up into the sky like some kind of a vulture or like an eagle and look down at what the heck is going on to make sense of it, to get a clear view. And so, I was reading an essay yesterday. One of my favorite thinkers is a guy by the name of Doug Casey. I just love this guy because he, like what I like to do, he cuts through all the nonsense. And just give you an example, when he talks about human history, he says there's only 2 things that really matter: the agricultural revolution and the industrial revolution. Everything else is just was an event. It may seem outlandish, but it's true, at least from my vantage point, when you soar up into the sky like an eagle. So let's do that now. And the political landscape. Oh, and by the way, he also said in the essay that he respects Democrats more because they actually have principle. Now, he detests both parties, absolutely detests both parties. But at least at the end of the day, you know what Democrats stand for. You know what they want to do. Republicans, on the other hand, kind of lack principle. I mean, what is it that they stand for? And right now, we know what they stand for. They've got the ground game, but is this really just opportunism? Probably is. But I would just add this to that regarding the Democrats. Yeah, you know what they stand for. You know what their principles are, but are they connecting with the public? It was a cliche growing up, and it's kind of losing. People. I think this is why people are disbanding the Democratic Party. But it was cliche to think Well, if you cared about the working man, and if you cared about people who were suffering, you voted Democrat. And if you cared about big business and wealth, you voted Republican. But I think that's kind of fallen apart today. And what's happened with the Democrats is it seems to be that they've become so out of touch with reality. They've become the professor class. They've become they've attached themselves to the uber elite and the uber elite's messaging and principles and beliefs and vision of the future. And so my question to you is, looking at all of this, laying out all the data that you did, getting into messaging in the issues, do you agree that the Democrats have lost their jig and their brand? And if so, what can they do to prevent 219 or 218 seats going to the Republicans?
Boy, that's a tough question. And I will admit to you that even some of the best minds in this country on the Democratic side have no idea what the Democratic message can or should be, simply because they're not connecting. The irony is that one of the better connectors that the Democrats have has been traditionally Joe Biden. And yet, and I've written, as you know, let Joe be Joe, and let him just be real and authentic. That doesn't seem to be enough as well. But here, let's break this apart. In essence, we know what Republicans are against. What are they for? Tax cuts. That's it. Tax cuts. And then oppose pretty much anything else that Democrats have on the agenda. And so I would, at the very least, try to force the Republicans' hand by saying, all right, we're in a whole series of crises right now. What would you do better? How would you do it? All right, would we give more aid to the people of Ukraine? How much more? And is that the sort of aid that you would give if you were in the White House and in control of Congress? Is that not the same aid that we gave to Vietnam and Iraq and Afghanistan? Tell us what you're going to do and how it's better. Inflation, intractable problem. Okay. By saying you made money too easy. You handed out $2 trillion. Where did it go? All right, Democrats can lead by saying, and the president has been trying to get the message out. We've created 8.7 million jobs. Now, look, were we aware that inflation could happen? Absolutely. But 8.7 million people are now working and they weren't. What do? Have inflation and keep people at home? Did we heat up the economy too much? But to the Republicans, what would you do? You'd give that money back, you claim, in terms of tax cuts. But if that leads to further investment, is that not in itself inflationary? Tell us what you will do. Mm-hmm. Tell us what you've been for that have made this country significantly better. And then the third thing is, and this can have serious impact, I think, among suburban women and younger women as well as try to win back, some Hispanic and Black voters that have been lost. Donald Trump. Do you really want Donald Trump back? Should the Republican Party as a party begin to move away en masse from Donald Trump? Honestly, that's all I can think of right now. The Democrats are not in control of that message.
Yeah. Although, I mean, that discussion can happen at the party level, but ultimately, what do the Republican voters want? It may look to be that they still want Trump. It's still they still may feel that that's their guy. Although I do see DeSantis emerging, and a potential challenge, a potential threat. I don't think it would cause a rift in the party. I think they represent essentially the same thing. They just have a different way of delivering it. DeSantis has, you may hate him, you may disagree with him, but there's no question about it. He appears more presidential, but he can strike like Trump does. So it's an interesting competition, potential brewing competition going on there. The thing about the Democrats is that, some of the things that you've talked about, they've backed themselves into the corner. And so what do they do now? Can they abandon Ukraine? I mean, can they really go before the public and say we need to send 60 billion, 56 billion? I mean, we've never even aided Israel that much money, and Israel is supposed to have this, historic connection. The Republicans would call it the Judeo-Christian historic connection of values. But I mean, this goes to the next level, and the reports of where that money is going and who's getting that money. And now you've just wasted potentially $60 billion. And that's going to be very difficult to explain to the public. But I mean, it's going to be hard for the Democrats because, voters have always been conscious of their checkbooks. I would say that the consciousness has risen to a level that I've never seen before. And so to say we've created all these jobs, well, I mean, I looked at this locally, and I would imagine that this is going on nationally. I went to a few of the big manufacturers just out of curiosity. I went to their websites and looked at job openings. Don't worry, I'm not trying to get a new job, Dad. Just doing some data collection. And I saw 35 job openings. And it looks like they've been sitting there a while. So we've created all these new jobs, but yet we know that there's a crisis with trying to get people to work. And people aren't stupid. You can't trick them into thinking the economy is good when they're watching their purses and their wallets shrink. And you can't trick them into thinking that, look, the job market is booming when everybody knows that a lot of people don't want to work and don't need to work. So how do they get out of that?
Well, look, there are some people who don't want to work, and that's clear. There are some people who don't have to work, but there's a hell of a lot who do need to, want to, and have to. And fact of the matter is their wallet shrinks even further when they're putting nothing in their wallet because they're not working. And so that in itself is an issue. I still think that all is not lost, because while the Democrats have, are stuck playing defense right now, there is a record of accomplishment. And it could very well be at this moment in time that Republicans are scoring because they're the party against. But Democrats need to make the point that when they were the party for, George H.W. Bush, look, a great man. He will be appreciated more by history, but he lost when he lost touch during the recession of 1991 and early 92. George W. Bush, by all accounts, you get away the usual Buchanans and Pierces and Andrew Johnsons, so on. George W. Bush rates among the worst, and Donald Trump's in a class by himself. So what do you do when you do have power? What do you do besides cut taxes? And so I do think all is not lost, but I also think that it's getting late. Ron DeSantis, I think there's a very real possibility that Ron DeSantis is the Chris Christie of 2022 and 2023, that in effect, he may very well be peaking too soon. That it's really great. He's running for re-election. He, by all appearances, is in very good shape for re-election, just as Chris Christie was. But when push comes to shove, are some of the more, I'm going to call them brazen policies in Florida actually going to backfire on him in his home state? And then secondly, he's got a Donald Trump problem. He's whether Trump gets the nomination or not, he can do a lot of damage to blocking Ron DeSantis. So I'm not sure how viable DeSantis is going to be going forward.
Well, I'll just close by saying, I think it was yesterday, I read an essay by Mark Mellman. And of course, he laid out a whole thing about essentially why you don't need to worry about so much about the Democrats. They've been here, they've been in this situation before. But I think that the strongest case that he made was 2022 does not equal 2024. And by way of history, he pointed to the midterms when the Democrats lost a ton of seats in between Bill Clinton running, but then the next year the next cycle when Bill Clinton went up for re-election, he nabbed it. And then the same thing repeated with Obama after Obama's first term, major loss of seats in the House. But Obama went in to 2012 securing the victory. And so I guess if you're a Democrat, there's some reason not to lose hope right there.
Yeah, and let's end on that reason to not lose hope argument right now.
Now, is that a one-sided or just in general of losing hope?
Oh, that's both. That's in general too.
Okay.
Yeah, my optimism, as I've told you, is being tested these days, but I'm remaining hopeful. Okay, good conversation.
Yeah, have a good one.
Yeah, yep. Thanks, Jerry. Bye.